There are men who walk into a room and don't have to say much. They don't try to impress. They don't seek attention. They don't act interesting. But somehow, without forcing anything, people notice them. Not because they're trying to be different, but because they're fully there, solid, grounded, unshaken by the need to be seen. Women are especially attuned to that kind of presence. They don't need to analyze it. They just feel it. She might be caught in her own thoughts, mid-story in her own life, but something deep beneath the surface makes her pause, not to respond, but to listen, not with her ears, with her intuition. There are moments when a woman hears something so quiet, it stays with her for days, not because it was clever, not because it was bold, but because the man who said it wasn't trying to be anything. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't seek her approval. He just said something real and left space for her to feel it. You and I should have a real conversation. Most men can't say that, and even fewer can mean it. Because to say something like that and mean it, you have to no longer be waiting to be chosen. You have to speak not to be accepted, but because what you're saying is already true for you. Spoken slowly, gently, clearly, without asking for anything in return. This video is not about charm. It's not about clever tricks. It's not even about getting someone to say yes. It's about presence and how 3 words, when they come from the right place, can open something in her, not because you're trying to be different, but because you've finally stopped trying to be anything at all. Part 1. The first encounter. There are afternoons that pass quietly, as if they were never recorded in memory, and yet, somehow, a small detail lingers for a very long time. A quiet space at the back of a bookshop, at the end of the street, sunlight streaming through a dusty window pane, the scent of old paper floating in the air, and in the midst of it all, a woman flipping through the pages of a book, not searching for anyone, but not entirely closed off from the world either. Every one of her movements was so gentle, it felt as if time itself slowed down, not wanting to disturb something delicate. A man stepped into that scene, not to draw attention, and not to prove anything. He didn't time it, didn't overthink. He simply stood near her for a moment, then spoke, his voice low but steady. "I think you and I should have a real conversation." That sentence carried no pleasantries, no cleverness, no humor to break the ice. It was just an invitation, soft but not hesitant, and it was precisely that which shifted the air between them, if only for a few seconds. She turned around, not out of curiosity, but because something in that presence made her feel something she couldn't ignore. The man didn't probe, didn't say anything more. He just stood there, clear, unforced, close enough to connect, far enough not to trigger her defenses. Maybe that was what made her pause, because women aren't drawn to words, they're drawn to the inner state of the one who speaks them. Across the bookshelf, another man had noticed her too. He stepped up with a bright smile, his tone casual. "You like French literature? I've read that one too. If you're not busy, maybe we could grab a coffee. If you're not busy, maybe we could grab a coffee." Everything about him was pleasant and well-timed, but somewhere in his eyes, in his voice, she sensed something familiar. He was hoping to be chosen, and that feeling made everything he said vanish quickly. But the first man didn't try to stand out. He didn't wait for a nod to feel like he mattered. He said what he wanted, and then let the silence do the rest. No pushing, no pulling, and that was what unsettled her, not because she didn't know what to say, but because, for the first time, someone had shown up without needing anything from her. She might have walked away. They might have left the bookstore without another word. But at some point, during a dull conversation, or in a glance that lacked presence, she would remember that look, the man who appeared not to control, but simply to say what he believed to be true, and then to release it from outcome. Do you dare to say what you want without needing it to be accepted? Are you present enough to invite without clinging? What lingers in a woman's memory isn't perfection or a well-rehearsed impression. It's the moment someone is quiet enough not to lose themselves under her gaze. Part 2. An invitation without the energy of asking for permission. There are invitations that aren't spoken to please, nor are they carefully considered to see whether they're safe. They come naturally, like a stream flowing from the speaker's inner world. No need for a reason, no nod of agreement to feel justified. They're simply a truth, spoken at the right time to the right person, without needing to be confirmed. Saturday night, you and me, an evening without phones. The man who said that didn't raise his voice, didn't smirk to read her reaction, didn't let a question mark float in the air. He didn't turn it into a negotiation between longing and permission, nor try to create a pleasant atmosphere to cover up any insecurity. That sentence came out steady, as if he had already lived it before he ever said it out loud. And that's why. She paused, not because of what the invitation said, but because of how it was said. In those 3 short sentences, there was none of the energy of a child asking for permission to play, nor the tentative edge of someone afraid of being turned down. Only presence, clear, complete, and unwavering. She had heard many invitations, ones wrapped in the polite disguise of "I respect you," but in truth, they were fear hiding behind courtesy. Phrases like "if you're not too busy," or "whenever you feel comfortable," might sound gentle, but they lacked vitality. They carried the energy of asking permission, placing her in the role of deciding whether the meeting could exist. And that, in a quiet way, made her feel less drawn in. This man wasn't like that. He didn't try too hard, nor did he lower himself. He simply invited and let the invitation stand, not stepping back, not pushing forward, like a slow and steady breath. If she agreed, that would be lovely, but if not, he would remain as he was, not shaken, not convincing, not twisting his words to make the moment feel less vulnerable. There's something women sense quickly when a man is inviting her into his world and when he's asking for permission to exist in hers. The first stirs her curiosity. The second gives her a role she was never meant to carry. A man who's clear doesn't need to speak louder. He just needs not to waver. And it's that quiet certainty that makes her want to hear more. There's something women sense quickly when a man is inviting her into his world and when he's asking for permission to exist in hers. The first stirs her curiosity. The second gives her a role she was never meant to carry. A man who's clear doesn't need to speak louder. He just needs not to waver. And it's that quiet certainty that makes her want to hear more. It doesn't matter where you're inviting her or whether your words are elegant or simple. What makes her pause is the way you say it. An invitation doesn't need to be accepted to be meaningful. It only needs to be true and spoken by someone who knows what he wants. When you stop trying to convince her, she begins to feel free. And in that freedom, sometimes, is where attraction quietly begins. Because sometimes, the man who makes a woman feel led isn't the one who gets her to say yes, but the one who makes her wonder, "That's strange. Why do I want to step into that so much?" Part 3. Leadership in a relationship. There are moments in a relationship when things are no longer as clear as they were at the beginning. The two still talk, still meet, but the distance grows quietly between them. No one says anything wrong, no one does anything cruel, and yet the atmosphere has changed. The connection, once so vivid and alive, now feels blurred. like an old photo faded by time. If neither steps forward, that relationship will slowly slip into a state of existing without truly living. When a man senses this, some choose silence, treating it as just a phase, hoping that things will somehow return to the way they were. Others say, "Whatever you want, I'll go along." It sounds respectful, but in truth, it's a form of retreat. He places her in the role of the one who must hold things together, who must choose, who must carry the weight of both of them. And even if he doesn't mean to, it leaves her feeling alone in something that was supposed to be shared. To lead in a relationship is not about control. It is the quiet strength to speak up, to name what's slipping away, not to blame, but to break the silence. A man who shows up at the right moment doesn't do so to take charge, but because he understands. If no one moves, the distance will finish what silence began. And so, on a quiet, rainy afternoon, between two people who used to be close, he simply says, "You and I should rebuild what once made us choose each other." He doesn't demand, he doesn't pressure. He simply places a pause in the current of confusion, like someone who still believes in what they once shared. His words make no promises, but they have gravity, not because they are forceful, but because they are honest. He doesn't try to make her stay. He only reminds her of what she once walked into, with someone who never stepped away. When a woman is tired, she doesn't need you to have all the answers. What she needs is clarity. In the very moment she no longer has the strength to hold the shared feelings alone. A man's leadership at this point doesn't come from poetic words or perfect timing. It comes from the courage to say what needs to be said, even knowing it may not be received with ease. Because sometimes, the one who dares to be honest is also the one who helps the relationship not disappear. The difference between "whatever you want" and "we need to begin again" doesn't lie in the wording, but in the intention behind it. One is a quiet surrender, the other is a quiet return. Women don't need to be pulled back. What they need is a steady place, so that if they ever choose to turn around, they know where they're coming home to. Not a place that used to be perfect, but a place where a man doesn't run when things get hard. In love, presence is sometimes more powerful than a solution. You don't have to know how to fix what's broken, but if you are there, steady, unguarded, without needing anything back, then your presence becomes an unspoken invitation, something that needs no explanation, but is deeply felt. And to a woman who's been hurt, that presence may mean more than any promise you could ever speak. She doesn't need you to swear you'll change. She doesn't need proof. She just needs to feel that when she stops and looks back, you are still there, not chasing, not retreating, simply there, as clear and steady as you were in the beginning, present enough to remind her of what once made you both choose each other. Part 4. How you speak matters more than what you say. Not all emotions come from the words being spoken. Sometimes they arrive through something less visible, the way those words are spoken. A woman can hear the same invitation 100 times, but only once does it truly make her pause. Not because the phrasing is special, but because the one speaking holds something in his presence that makes her feel safe and seen. In communication, especially between a man and a woman, people often focus too much on content, forgetting that the emotional state behind it is what gets felt first. A man isn't heard only because of what he says. He's first felt through how he shows up when saying it. Presence carries before language, and women, more than most, are tuned to that frequency. I once heard a woman talk about a moment that moved her, even though it was just a brief exchange. Two men, strangers to one another, both said the exact same thing to her. "You and I should talk more." The first one said it in a low voice, his eyes glancing away, as if even he wasn't sure he had the right to stand that close. Though he meant well, Something in the way he said it was unclear. Even he wasn't certain he was allowed to exist in her world. The second man was different. Same sentence, same setting, but when he spoke, the space didn't tighten. He spoke slowly, his tone no louder, yet it carried the steadiness of someone who didn't need agreement to feel right in his offering. There was no pressure, no probing, just a steady rhythm, inviting but not imposing, a presence that gave her room, not demands. Women don't just hear with their ears, they sense with their whole being. They read what hasn't yet been said, and often they pick up on fear before a word is even spoken. You could say the most beautiful thing in the world, but if it's wrapped in neediness, urgency, or the fear of being rejected, it's that fear she'll feel first, and that's what truly reaches her. The first man, despite his kindness, made her hesitate, because he was waiting for a response to feel complete. The second man wasn't asking for a yes. He was simply speaking from something already clear within him, and letting her feel free if she chose to move toward that clarity. There's a difference between needing approval and sharing your truth, and women can feel it deeply. Many people learn how to say the right thing, but they forget to live honestly before they speak. A man who knows what matters to him and who speaks it with steadiness, without pressure, naturally creates a safe space, not because he promises not to hurt her, but because his presence isn't tied to how she reacts. He's not waiting to be told he can exist. He simply is, and that's the boundary between someone who invites and someone who asks for permission. The first makes a woman reflect on what she wants. The second asks her to carry emotional weight that was never meant to be hers. It's subtle, but women feel it. One opens space. The other gives her something to protect herself from. What moves a woman has never really been about the words. It's about the posture of the one speaking. It's when he's not trying to be accepted, not trying to convince, not turning his presence into a test she must pass. He simply says what's true and allows her, if she wants, to step toward it on her own in a space that feels safe enough to do so. Because real attraction doesn't come from trying to impress. It comes from the steadiness someone brings into the space. When a woman feels that no part of her is being demanded, she finally has the room to return to her own emotions, and from there, open herself to the person standing in front of her. Part 5. You and I evokes 4 things she feels. Not every word needs to be special to touch someone. Some things are simple, yet when spoken at the right time, from a settled heart, they make the listener pause for a long while. You and I, it's a familiar phrase, but when spoken by a man who is clear about his feelings, who respects the one standing before him, it stops being a sentence. It becomes a mirror, reflecting honesty, calmness, and a quiet desire to connect without creating pressure. Women aren't moved by technique, but by truth. They can sense the difference between something born from need and something born from inner stillness. You and I, when said in the right way, doesn't make noise, doesn't try to impress, but somehow opens a space. Because it doesn't speak to the mind, but to a quiet emotional rhythm that feels real without needing to explain itself. When she hears that from a man who is grounded and at ease, she doesn't just hear it, she feels seen, not to be held onto, but to be understood. He isn't waiting for a reaction. He doesn't push. He simply shares what he feels and leaves the space open, so that if she chooses to step closer, it's because she wants to, not because she was pulled. A sentence like that, when it comes from a quiet place inside, can awaken 4 things within her. That she is being cared for, not in a way that possesses. That she is being respected, without being interrupted. That the man standing before her knows what he wants, and that he is someone willing to begin, not to win, but to preserve something honest between them. Some men don't need to create something surprising or grand. They simply pause, look at the person beside them, and say, "You and I, maybe we should slow down a little." A simple sentence, yet enough to make a woman slow her steps and begin to listen to herself. Because when the world pushes us to be quick, to be sure, it's the one who doesn't rush, doesn't overstep, who makes her stop. It's not a proposal that needs agreement. It's not a question waiting for a yes. It's an invitation, clear enough not to confuse, quiet enough not to overwhelm. That man doesn't speak to test someone's feelings. He doesn't speak to affirm his worth. He doesn't need an outcome, because what he says isn't about gaining anything. It's about letting the other person witness something true in him, something that needs no proof. And sometimes that's all it takes. Someone calm enough not to pressure, sincere enough to offer peace, and clear enough not to leave room for misinterpretation. When a woman feels that, she can finally let her guard down, and from there, begin to touch her own real feelings. True attraction doesn't live in grand gestures. It lives in the steadiness that makes the other feel safe, not because she's being held back, but because she knows she doesn't have to brace herself. It's in a gaze that holds no judgment. It's in a silence that asks for nothing to be filled. She doesn't need someone who always has the answers. She needs someone who doesn't make her guess, someone who doesn't speak in halves, someone who doesn't hand her the weight of emotions he hasn't clarified. She needs someone deep enough not to rush, honest enough not to hide behind pretty words, and clear enough to say what he feels, then leave her free to choose. And sometimes, all it takes is one sentence, "You and I." When it's spoken from a heart that expects nothing, the listener will fall quiet because she feels something far beyond the words. Part 6. You and I isn't just for love. Some phrases, when spoken the right way, don't just open a door to connection, they reshape how others perceive you. You and I is one of those phrases. It's not reserved for romantic closeness. It can become a bridge, spanning distances that once felt silent, simply through your honest and grounded presence. With a colleague, you might say, "You and I, let's untangle this together." Not to give orders, not to please, but to stand on the same side, to face the issue together instead of facing each other with defense. When said with the spirit of equality, those words don't pull someone into your plan. They invite them onto shared ground, where trust leads, and no one feels manipulated. With a friend, you could simply text, "You and I, we need to sit down sometime," for no reason at all. There's no need for a specific occasion, no big event to justify it. Just a moment slow enough to step outside the chaos and return to what's most real between two people, simply being in each other's presence. With the woman you love, it could be the softest invitation. You and I, we should have a night with no phones, not to control, not to craft a romantic moment, but to gently remind each other that beyond the vibrations and notifications, there's still a quiet space, one where only the two of you exist, with no roles to perform. The phrase "you and I" is not a formula. It's a way of speaking your want, not with an expectation to be answered, but with clarity that comes from within. And when spoken from a sincere place, it carries a very different energy, not because the words are poetic, but because you are truly present inside what you're saying. Many people use words as a coating to hide emptiness or fill silence, but a conscious man is different. He uses words as a bridge, not polished, not performative, just steady. Steady enough that two people can walk toward each other without fear of the ground collapsing beneath them. That's why his words feel different. It's not the vocabulary, but the emotional depth behind it. There's no pressure, yet there's direction, no demand, yet complete clarity. It's not a test, nor a request for permission. It's simply an invitation, honest enough not to make someone pull away, free enough that no one feels forced to say no. When you say you and I the right way, the person listening doesn't just hear your voice. They feel a real part of you stepping forward, grounded, not trying to be anything, not playing any role. And if the one listening happens to be a woman who's still enough to truly hear, then in that moment, what she feels won't just be a sentence. It will be the clear presence of a man, not needing to prove, not asking to be validated. He is simply there, real enough for her to believe in, and calm enough to make her want to stop and stay. A final note. You and I is not a magic spell. It loses its meaning the moment it's used as a trick to impress. And it certainly can't reach anyone if it comes from a man who still needs to be loved in order to feel worthy. That phrase only carries meaning when it comes from someone quiet enough to understand himself, a man who no longer lives for validation, who no longer seeks agreement. He says what needs to be said, not to be heard, but to express something real, clear, gentle, and without expectation. If you're trying to get her attention, pause. Women aren't drawn to effort that tries to appear special. They're drawn to stillness, clarity, and quiet confidence, the kind of presence only a man who is truly here can bring. And that doesn't come from the words you choose, but from how firmly you stand in the life you live. If you want her to see your real self, first learn how to respect yourself. You don't need to say much. You don't need to try hard. You just need to go deep enough not to wait for a reaction. When you live like that, even the softest words you speak will make people stop and feel. And if you're looking to connect without having to trade parts of yourself, if you want a relationship that doesn't require effort just to survive, start with something small. You and I, we need a silence deep enough to understand what hasn't been said yet. If something in what you've just heard touched something in you, stay with us. Subscribe, share, not to spread content, but to help hold a space of presence, a space where men can speak their truth and women can listen without defense. Because in the end, you don't need many words to create connection. You just need a clear posture. I don't need to be chosen, but I still choose. Not striving to be loved, just ready to show up. And sometimes that's all it takes for a woman to want to stay.